Remembrance of the Daleks was the first serial of the 25th season of Doctor Who. The story's setting brought the Doctor back to 76 Totter's Lane in the year 1963. Explosive, action-packed, and at last, providing proof that Daleks can actually go upstairs, it remains a fan favourite to this day. Featuring Sylvester and Sophie, who were well established as the Doctor and Ace by this time, the story boasts a stellar supporting cast. And I'm pleased to have two of those casts with me today as part of Phantom's TSV series. Please welcome Pamela Salem and Karen Gledhill. Hello both, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
You go first.
Very well.
So we'll have to work out who goes first and who goes second, I think, as we go through this. But we're in a really topsy-turvy world right now, aren't we? How are you both? How have you been through these turbulent times?
You go first, Pamela.
All right. How have we been? Well, thank God we're here to tell the tale. That's the major thing. And it's just been like a year from another planet and another world. Nothing stranger than anything in Doctor Who to me. It's been a very strange time, but, thank God we're here.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. It's not beyond a futuristic Doctor Who plot, let's be honest, is it?
Strangely, when it first happened, I did contact David, who obviously is Big Finish, which is where we've spent more time recently, but and said this is like, living in one of your stories. Where are countermeasures when we need them? We need them to help us and get us out of this plot. But we've been very lucky here because we moved down to Cornwall sort of last summer, and then but we were spending time between London and Cornwall because we had a lot to do down here. But when it was obvious that things were not going to weren't looking that great, we decided to come down here in March before lockdown, and we've been here ever since. We've made a couple of very brief trips to London to see our children. We haven't seen the kids, and that's been horrible, really, really horrible. But we managed one or two trips, and they both came down in the summer and things. But it's all been very socially distanced, and we're also, this place is amazing. It's huge. It's 20 acres, and we've got loads and loads of work to do. And we've set up a trail camera down on the stream, and we've got an otter now that comes up most days. We don't ever see her, but we just see her on the thing. So we've got otter, fox, stoats, all kinds of birds, badgers, foxes. I mean, you name it, deer. There's just it's amazing, and we've had loads and loads to do. So actually, it's been quite good. And Matt's been able to do all his work on Zoom, and the Zoom has been marvelous. We've had been doing loads of music, recording loads of music. So actually, from a personal point of view, apart from desperately missing my kids and my friends, getting stuck in lockdown with your husband after having been at work every day for 35 years is a bit of a shock. but we're doing all right. We're doing okay.
I mean, I've moved to working from home full time. It's quite a change, but I much prefer this. I much prefer this sort of way of life.
Yes, a lot of people have been saying that, and it is a slight worry for some people, I think. They don't necessarily want their other half at home all the time.
I think a lot of things are going to change, because I really think all during this time we're changing, because we're all finding things in ourselves that we didn't have before. And the Zoom has put me in touch with my old meditation group in Los Angeles, which I haven't seen for years. Now we run it. Or a whole lot of things that happen that I hope will go on happening, which, have all sorts of things like a choir that we work together with, virtual choir, and all these, because of course the choir of the church is no longer functioning. And we've actually tried to make a little virtual choir production ourselves, which we are dying to see. We've nearly finished it, and it seems to have worked.
Oh, that's
just 2 carols, where we all had to record in our own rooms.
Yeah. I'll send you
something
something.
Worse.
No, I know. I'll send you some that we've done with the accordion orchestra, the big accordion orchestra.
I'd love to hear it. And a whole lot of things, seeing plays and the Metropolitan Opera and all sorts of things I've discovered. But I must say, I do miss hugging people. I'm very lucky because people come in to walk the dog, and I don't feel, isolated here. I've got a lot of lovely friends who've, come in. But this business of just, you have to hug the dog a lot, but it's just how we miss. We don't know how much we miss them. It's made us appreciate each other better.
Yeah,
I hope it has. I really, I've been really inspired by the way that the arts has had to rethink the way that it has to be. I mean, you see all these sort of orchestras and choirs and musical troupes who've taken to Facebook and done all these sort of things on Zoom, and it is just beautiful to see how people have reacted. But it has hit the arts so hard, and that's the fear I've got for the future at the moment is how will that recover?
I think it will recover. We were talking about this with my family on Zoom this morning, and how actually it'll probably just reset it a bit. And I think actually, in some ways, a lot of things need resetting. And I think we've become a little complacent in all areas of life. And the arts will be fine. We may not have the 64,000 actors who are currently registered with Spotlight in this country, but we don't need 64,000 actors, and it may just make people think a little more carefully about what they want to do with their lives, and it'll come back. It'll come back, and I think it'll come back the better for it, because we're all having to really examine what we're here for, and it's not about being a famous actor or a celebrity or this. It's actually about storytelling, and that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to doing our job of storytelling, and the same with music. And I'm really hoping that it will refresh the profession, even though there's going to be an awful lot of casualties along the way. And I know for a lot of actors, it's very, very tough.
But I suppose the arts have always reflected the times, but everything reflects the times. I mean, I think one of the good things is that you see the gaps. You see the gaps, for instance, in this country, in the medical system. You can see a whole lot of areas that really need help. They're stark. And you remember that moment when the whole world suddenly saw dolphins in Venice and all these sort of things because of the lack of pollution. But you could never do an experiment like that with the whole world on hold. No. And you can't deny those things, and you can't deny how quickly they recover given half a chance. So a whole lot of areas are, to me, being made clearer and given us the chance to think. I mean, obviously it's not going to be paradise tomorrow, but we could improve things. It's helped us. It's like experiments that you could never have done. And you could actually point to it and say, you cannot say no. That happened. The whole world went on hold and that happened. That's amazing.
And not entirely outside of the realms of a science fiction plot, which is, as I said right back at the beginning of this, realistically, because we would have only dreamed of this as being a sort of a far-fetched thing that could happen to us, but it has. And as I said, I think you're right. We've learned a lot from it, hopefully. And like you, I've missed hugs as well. It's terrible the things you miss, the simplest things, but I've missed them as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it wouldn't be very good if I didn't get us talking about the thing that brings us all together in common today, and that is, of course, you both getting guest roles on the Remembrance of the Daleks story back in the 80s. How did the opportunities to get into Doctor Who at that stage come about for you?
Shall I go first, Pam? Because it was pretty much my first television job, and I'd worked quite a lot in theatre, and I was a member of the Actors Centre where you could sort of do classes and things, and I had done a big workshop with Andrew Morgan, and he auditioned me for something else that wasn't Doctor Who, and I can't remember what it was now, that he did before Doctor Who, and I didn't get the part in that. But when Doctor Who came up, he offered me the part of Alison in Remembrance of the Daleks. So it sort of, so it came to a contact. I wasn't right for something else he did. I think I can't remember what it was called now, but anyway, it was another science fiction type thing that he did. And so that's how I got it. Pamela, he must have known you, I would think.
Honestly, no, I think I was asked to be in it, but I remember thinking that the clothes were rather stuffy. Now I look back at them and think, oh, this is rather fun, what a time it was. But we sort of just emerged out of that time. And I was thinking, not that the clothes was the only thing, but at the time I was thinking, oh, these sweaters and skirts and things like that. And now I look at them and I think they're really, of that time. It does take me back. But it was fantastic to do with this bunch of people that we all got on so well. And Sylvester kept us in hysterics. Yeah. And he had magic tricks, didn't he? Do you remember the magic tricks he would show us in between?
I do. And we had some, yes. I do remember feeling slightly intimidated when the very first read through, because I hadn't really done any telly, and I'd done one little tiny thing, I think, before, and I didn't really know how it worked, but we sort of were there, and I remember Sam coming up and saying, "Hello, I'm Simon Williams," and I was kind of practically on my knees, because of course I knew he was Simon Williams, because I'd grown up on Upstairs, Downstairs, and he'd been my complete sort of, hero, and whatever. He did not need to introduce himself, but ever the gentleman. He always would do that, but he's also very naughty, as everybody knows.
That's always the fun, I think, of going in. It's probably a challenge going into a long-running drama like Doctor Who, I suppose, where you're coming in as guest performers. You never quite know how you're going to land in with the cast, and I suppose that first period through the read-through and rehearsals sort of sets the tone really for how the production's going to go, I would assume.
Yes, it's quite nerve-wracking the first day, I often find. Do you, Karen?
Yeah.
That first day, and it was rather strange because I had done a Doctor Who before, so it was very nice to be asked to come and do another one. Yeah. It was absolute joy to be asked to do another one.
I was really lucky with Sophie, because it was very early in her career as Ace as well, and yes. So she and I, she's just pretty much the same age. I think she's a couple of years younger than me, and we became very good friends through doing that show, because it was about 8 weeks in those days. I mean, nowadays it doesn't.
A long time, wasn't it?
I think it was about 8 weeks we were on that show, because we were in the studio for a long time rehearsing before we went on location and then did the studio filming. So it was a long show. I'm sure they do it in a couple of days now. But so we all became quite good friends, and Sophie and I got on really well, and because we were both playing the sort of sidekick to the boss, we had that we kind of identified quite strongly with each other, and she was just really sweet and really helpful and lovely, and that made it very much easier. And of course there was Dursley as well, who was the same age as well, and was just emerging as this rather sort of beautiful, talented young man. So we had a bit of a crew going, which was very helpful for me.
And this particular series in particular, this one that we're talking about now, it's fondly remembered. It was full of action. It seemed like an awful lot of fun. It was the start of the 25th anniversary, so it was quite a big time for Doctor Who back then. And I think there was a lot of expectation around it. But to take it back to the 60s, which I think they did terribly well, the costumes in particular, as you've already said, Pamela, were brilliant. And to take it back to the 60s and just take it right back to almost the genesis of Doctor Who was quite an ingenious thing to do at the time. I mean, Sylvester's well known for playing pranks, and I believe Simon is as well, from what you say.
Indeed.
Yeah, they're both very naughty. I think all that thing about going back to the 60s, it was very puzzling for us. I mean, the thing is that the actors who go into Doctor Who aren't necessarily knowledgeable in the same way that fans are. So I don't think we were that worried about it being where how it fitted into the sort of overall picture. The whole 60s thing was quite confusing, because we didn't know what all that was about. In fact, we didn't know what was going on most of the time. I did, because I'm, what does Sam call me? Head girl or something. So I'd be there kind of reading, and I had huge sort of sheets of what I was wearing. I didn't realise there was continuity, so I had all this kind of sheets of what I was wearing and what day it was and which scene had come before this, that and the other. So I was very kind of organised about it all. But certainly Sam and particularly Sylvester didn't have a clue what was going on. And I think it was a sort of, so we're not as informed. So our preoccupations are probably slightly different from those of the fan base. What do you think, Pam? Would you agree with that?
Well, I didn't have any idea it was about the 25th anniversary or any of that. It was just a story, and one sort of grappled with it as it came. So I do remember somebody writing and saying, how interesting that you have mentioned a character. It was Quatermass. And I said, what a clever connection. And I said, what is that connection? I have no idea what he's talking about. And somebody said, no, this is a character from Quatermass. And they've just linked it. So the fans knew that, but I didn't, which I should have known. I was amazed. I thought that was a very lovely little hint, for those who know.
That was the reference to Bernard, wasn't it?
That was it. That was it. Yes, that's right. And I didn't know what they were referring to. It was so clever,
Part of good writing, I think, in play there. You say that it was about 8 weeks, really. I suppose it was a couple of weeks in rehearsal. You did studio. There was obviously lots of location on this one. They took you out on location. You went to some very odd locations in London, but you also got to film with the infamous Daleks as well, of course. As you could see, I'm sporting my very own full-size prop. Gives a clue as to how much of a fan I am of the series. I'm terribly sorry.
Where is it? Oh, yes. Oh, that's a
have one of the Daleks behind me right now, keeping me company. Rusty, named Rusty, would you believe it? But filming with the Daleks has got to be fun, surely.
It was, I always mention that story where the poor fellow who was in one of them was forgotten and left in there while we all went to lunch. He was absolutely furious. I'm not surprised because nobody let him out. Oh. And what happened?
Yeah. I'd completely forgotten that. They were very funny in rehearsal, the actors, because they'd all go around with their, newspapers rolled on and doing. Because obviously they didn't have their costumes, so they were being Daleks and sort of walking around like Daleks and all this kind of stuff. It was very funny. But yeah, it's an absolute privilege to work with Daleks. I mean, goodness, it's the ultimate Doctor Who villain, the ultimate stories to be in, really. And I understand that it is still very popular because of the Daleks going upstairs. Although, of course, now they can fly all over the place, but they couldn't then.
Do any number of one things now these days because of the beauty of CGI, and the Remembrance was also packed full of sort of stunts and special effects. How involved did you get in any of the special effects through? Were you involved in any of them particularly?
Well, the fighting, I suppose there must have been special effects put in around the fighting in the schoolroom, wasn't it? I remember.
Yes.
Broken glass and stuff like that. I don't know how they did that. Was that sugar glass? What happened? But looking at it, it was fairly violent. I don't know how we did that.
I think it was. I actually think it was all put in afterwards. I don't really remember. I remember looking at it and thinking, "Oh, that's clever." Afterwards, when we actually saw it, I thought, I don't remember it being like that. It never does feel like that, though. It never when you're actually filming. They say the camera never lies, but actually it lies all the time. And so doesn't it? I mean, it does. So I do remember jumping down when we were in that very last sequence, having to jump down a sort of chute out of the little capsule thing. I don't know what we were, some little sort of capsule. I had to jump down. We all had to jump down, I think, but I went down first, and that was a little concerning at the time because there wasn't a lot of padding at the bottom. I mean, there was some, but it really was a question of, okay, here we go. Down to that. But I think the special effects really did go enough because there was all that fighting in the playground. There was a lot of fighting in the playground, wasn't there?
Yes, there must have all been. But now, when you look at it now, it was pretty good. When you look at what they do with CGI now, actually, sometimes I think the film gets totally sacrificed to the CGI effects now. I almost know them, They were so amazing when they first arrived, when an animal turned into his dark materials, the golden compass, I think it was called in the film, that when those animals kept changing, and they're real animals. Then last night I was seeing the extension of his dark materials on the television. I was so that it didn't have the effect on me of the first moment when those animals changed. And I suppose that's the same when you look through, because people say that the beginning of Doctor Who was people were using dish mops and all sorts of things, weren't they, for characters, and it all worked at the time. So everything in its place.
No, I found the inspiration behind the oud the other day. I dug up a celeriac. We've got a massive vegetable garden here, which we've done this year, and I dug up a celeriac.
I love
And
celeriac.
that is definitely where, yeah, but have you ever seen one with all its roots on? Okay,
Yes.
so they've got roots that just come out from the bottom, 15 of them, long roots. And I pulled it out of the ground. I thought, I've got an oud in my garden. That must have been the inspiration behind the oud, I think. You see, I do know a little bit about Doctor Who.
I was going to say, you must know a little bit about Doctor Who, because now you're referencing modern classic Who. So are you both watchers of the modern series?
I did watch Chris Eccleston's lot. I did watch all his ones, and because I'd worked with him, so I was really interested to see how he'd be. And I absolutely loved him, I have to say. I thought he was brilliant. And then I did watch sporadically more the next two lots, and then I kind of just lost the plot, really. I think there was just too much else to do, and the kids got older and weren't really interested in watching it anymore. So,
have you watched any of the modern series, Pamela?
Don't quite know when they show here, so I don't see that as a regular thing, as I'm usually just on public broadcasting. That's how I get to see all the British shows otherwise. But I would love to see some of them. Occasionally I've seen some on YouTube. You know, people have told me about one, and then I like to look at it.
Well, we're certainly we've got the Christmas special coming up now, which I believe the trailer's released today, and we get that coming up. But I think Jodie's made a fantastic impact on the series, and having a female Doctor, I think, has been a terrific change in direction. Again, I think it's great that programs can reinvent themselves and continue to keep reinventing themselves the way that particularly Doctor Who has. And a female Doctor, I think, just brings a different level, a different direction, which I think the show is enjoying a resurgence on right now, if I'm honest.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. I think, go on, Pamela.
Yes, it's really nice to hear that. That's great. I just slightly out of touch with it at the moment, except when I catch up. I used to catch up with Karen as well, because whenever we rehearsed, she knew everything.
Yeah.
So we said, what happened? You were really clued up.
Yeah.
So I caught up fast with that.
Yeah.
Very good memory for all the details she had.
Yeah. I'm a bit nerdy like that.
You were going to add something, Karen?
I'm just a bit nerdy like that. I think it's great that they've got a woman. I just think, these things have to and it doesn't seem to have lost the fan base at all. And there may even be young women who feel they can identify more with what's going on. And there seem to be an awful lot of people in it now. That's the only thing I would say. But it's good. It's good. I just think it's a serious. These things have to move with the times, and if they don't, they'll just go and get stuck. And she's great. I have a couple of them with her. She's great.
When is the special going to be on? The Christmas special?
So we have got the Christmas Day special coming up this year. They got it in the can before the pandemic. So it's a bit of pre-pandemic TV where they're not having to socially distance while they film it. So it's going to be great. It's full of Daleks. It's got John Barrowman back. So we're looking forward to it. It'll be great. It'll be great to sit down on Christmas Day and watch some new Doctor Who. That's for sure. I think going back again to what we talked about, I think the way TV and the way that people make TV has changed so much over the years. You look at the special effects now compared to the special effects that we've talked about from Remembrance. And there were lots of post effects, I agree, but there were lots of explosions in that particular story as well. And again, I think they're dangerous. No stunt men or anything, so you had to do all your own stunts if you were, by the sounds of it, jumping down chutes, and there was nobody there to stand in, no body doubles of any sort.
No, I didn't know any of that. And there were explosions, but they kept us away because they had all those explosions in Waterloo, didn't they, and under the tunnels and things. And I think famously they omitted to tell the local services that these explosions were going to be happening, and it was all just toward around the end of the time. Well, no, it was during the time of the IRA bombings and all sorts of things. So there was a bit of a hoo-ha about that when that happened, because all these fire brigade, the fire brigade turned up and things, because they were worried, of course, because whoever's job it was, didn't tell them that we were doing that.
And that's not allowed. course.
They sent fire brigade out, didn't they, to examine it all?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just come
Yeah.
back to me. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. But they kept us well away from all the explosions and things. They didn't, we weren't, I don't know how they did it, but they did. So,
We were too valuable.
of course, very valuable.
Of course, Doctor Who at that time, a time where they believed in great supporting cast, the two of you obviously included in that, but you had Simon Williams, George Sewell, Michael Sheard, the lovely Peter Halliday. I mean, the list just goes on. It was absolutely star-packed.
It was. And that was quite intimidating as well, because every scene, there was another well-known sort of face there. And, but great. No, it was great. It was a very good experience. Very good for me, because it just, it's watch and learn.
You say actually it was one of your first televisions, and I'm quite surprised by that. Actually, it didn't come across.
Well, how would a first television come across? I think well, I've done a lot of workshops.
Fear in the eyes.
It wasn't difficult, in a way. Doctor Who's not a difficult thing to do, because it's the same as it is for us now when we're doing it. It's massive make believe. That's all it is. So you don't have to really think too much about. I don't think you do in anything really, but particularly with Doctor Who, it's pretend. That's what acting is. It's let's pretend. So we pretended that we were Rachel and Alison, and there were Daleks all over the place. It's not that difficult. You just pretend, don't you? Do you think, Pam?
Well, I'm not sure. I was just thinking that's an interesting statement you've just made. Is it just to pretend? I think there are times when you're trying to be terribly, terribly real.
Yeah, but children are real in their pretense.
Yes.
It's the same with countermeasures now, with our earphones on and doing this, that, and the other. And all we do is we just kind of immerse. You should see us in those little boxes, bang, bang, this, that, and the other. Whoa, whoa, all this is going on, and it's because we're just completely engaged with this game that we're playing that is absolutely real. I mean, pretend and real aren't so far away, are they?
Well, you could actually say that the whole of life is like that, isn't it? Because we're pretending. Certainly, I feel this last year has probably been more virtual reality than anything I've ever experienced. I don't know. But it's an interesting thing because in fact, if it's too real, if you know what I mean, if it's just real, it can be boring. So you have to take the real and lift it into something that makes it watchable, doesn't it?
And, yeah. A good script will do that. If you've got a good script, and you've got a bit of energy behind it, and some actors who are engaged with it. It's just recently people were absolutely, I don't know whether you've seen this, Pamela, but David Tennant just did a thing where he was playing a real life character, this guy who killed loads of people in Cranley Gardens in the 80s and 70s and 80s. And David Tennant he was extraordinary, but what he was doing was, in a way, I don't mean to say this in a bad way, but it's actually not that hard. He was just very, very committed to what he was doing, and he just carried it through. And but people got very upset by it. A lot of his fans got very upset by it because he was evil, this man.
He played it very well, though, as well.
Oh, he was brilliant.
He's a wonderful actor.
He was brilliant.
God, he's a marvelous actor. He does.
The subject matter wasn't easy as well for him, and I think that underlines. I just think what you've just said, actually, Karen, for me, is that it is a lot of make believe, but it's how invested you are in what you're doing and the quality of the script that you've got. I think that can make the big difference. Mm. Because in many respects, Doctor Who over the years, there's been some fairly mixed quality, and I think part of the success of it, particularly in the 60s, was the quality of the actors and actresses that they had come along and actually put their heart and soul into giving performances that they gave to make the sort of TV that they made.
Yeah.
It's interesting because sometimes a bad script makes you work so hard at it to make it real that you do a very good performance, because it's so, well, I wouldn't say rubbish, I'm not talking about Doctor Who, but when you do get something that's really And you've got to make it work. You pull things out of yourself sometimes that you didn't realize you had. So even a bad script, even a bad year like 2020 can have its good results.
Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to have written a script like this particularly, though, ideally. But go on, give me an example of a bad script you've had over the years, Pamela, that you've really had to lift it. Have you got one? Have you got one where you've had a bad script and you've got to have lifted it?
I had a scene in The Professionals where it really, I didn't like how it went. I was talking about this woman and just saying she's a barmaid or something. The whole thing was terribly poor. Well, actually, I just didn't like the way it was approached, and I wasn't allowed to change it. And in the end, we knew how we could, Lewis Collins and I knew how we could make it better if we changed the line, and we did. And he said, please don't do that. It's American, actually. Don't do that. Don't change it. Okay, and this is the only time I've done this. I knew if I went again, and I did it again, and then they had to close, on the third one, so we got the take we wanted. Absolutely flew in his face, and we were right, but we were backing each other up. We said, got to say these lines differently, rewrite those few lines, and he had to let it go. And I mean, maybe even he saw it made more sense. But I just remember being very nervous inside that I was actually refusing to cooperate. Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, I don't think I've had to do that, but I have listened to all the countermeasure stuff recently because it's what you do in lockdown. And Pamela, you are absolutely brilliant. I have to say, I just listening to your journey. If you listening to them from the beginning and your journey through it, you are absolutely brilliant in this series. I really take my hat off to you. I really noticed it going back and just listening to them all through the whole first series and the whole second series, and I just thought, goodness, you really are really good. So whatever it is that you're doing is just absolutely right, and people should learn from you because it really is good.
I'm very touched that you say that, but I have to say that the writers have got to know us, haven't they? And so what they've done is they've put more meat into the stories to give us more things to develop and play with. And I think that's the delight of doing a serial as opposed to that one-off.
Yeah, and the information that we have now, we didn't have when we did Remembrance of the Daleks. We had very little background.
That's right.
And so we could only work with very limited material back in 1988, whenever it was, a long time ago. So now, in a way, knowing what we now know about our characters and about what happens to them later on, it's sort of, you go back to it and think, it's sort of, you can see the potential there, but it's a shame in a way that we didn't know more about them and have more to play with.
But I think that's always, sorry.
Oh, go on, Pam.
Well, there was a time once, wasn't there, when American film stars wouldn't do television serials. And I think they've completely changed now, with realizing the quality of what happens if you are in a serial, how you can develop a character. It's terribly satisfying for the actor to be able to develop like that.
I mean,
writing days when you come in with something it's got to be all done in a couple of days, and that's it. That's the most nerve-wracking thing in the world.
There is certainly credence in the way I think television has developed, and serials are becoming actually a key part of Hollywood in particular now, I think. What would have been interesting for me to understand is, see, you did these one-off roles as you saw them back in 1988, and then you were asked to come back for countermeasures. Did you approach it with any sort of trepidation that you were going back to a character? I mean, obviously now you've been in it for a while. You've obviously they've built a great series around it, but was it odd going back to the characters?
Well, yes. In that, when I filmed Doctor Who, I was 28, and when I started doing countermeasures, I was 50-something, and
Don't own up.
He's the only one. He looked the same. Absolutely
the same. Absolutely.
But, I mean, that was, well, you did look the same, Pamela, actually, but anyway, but that was alarming.
I was amazed. I said that to you. I was quite astonished. That was how many years?
Well, it was alarming, and it was even more alarming for the poor young chaps who were cast alongside me as my various boyfriends in the first couple of series, because they'd come into the green room and say, oh, because they didn't know anything about the history of it at all. And they come in and say, oh, what are you playing? I said, I'm playing Alison. You could see they're kind of half my age, and they're thinking, how's that going to work? But actually, it was all right. We got on all right. And I'm very, very childish, so that sort of helps, because I still don't really feel more than about 23. And I think that really does help in terms of...
Keep your wrinkles away. Is that how you keep your wrinkles away? Look at her.
Oh, no, I've got lots of wrinkles. You just can't see them. The light is great. You can't see them. I've got lots of wrinkles, but not grey. That's the only thing. A little bit. No, there's just a little bit here, but generally speaking, not grey. But of course, because it was vocal. In the end, it's just your voice, isn't it? And that you can. I just went every time we did it. So before doing the first one with Countermeasures, I went and watched Doctor Who. Watched Remembrance a few times just to kind of work out what was going on and get the voice pitch. Because it was immediately afterwards. So we had to try and keep that thing. And then every time we did a Countermeasures, I would listen to the previous one before we recorded the next lot, just to make sure, because my natural voice is a bit lower than Alison. So, yeah, I think there are a few technical things like that you do to try and make things more believable. But I found it scary, but it was so nice. I cannot tell you, it was so nice to see Pamela and to be with these guys and to meet Hugh, who immediately became part of the family. And it's been a joy. It's been a joy, and I've really, really missed it this year.
Yes, so I really missed it. But never mind, God willing, it'll come back again.
Oh,
but in fact, robots, I did something that was based on the Carrington Robots of Death. And that was much more worrying, because she was meant to be just a few years on. And I was 28 when I did that. How can you just be a few years on when you're,
Yeah, quite.
So I tried to lighten the voice, as you say, and tried to hear what I was doing then. And I think they said it worked, but it was a bit worrying. I said, how? Tell me if I suddenly sound, far too old for the character. But I think they kept an eye on that. But that was a bit nerve-wracking.
I understand the lunches at Big Finish are something to talk about, aren't they? Don't they look after you very well with their lunches?
The lunches are absolutely. You never used to eat a big lunch, but when you do Big Finish, you just can't resist it. Every day is a different cuisine. I don't know how Toby does it. And he works, and then he brings it all in, and it's all laid out, and he's got a real gift of producing that food. It's not just a good lunch. There's somebody very gifted behind it. Otherwise, I make something, well, especially now, sandwiches, and there's 20 implements used just to make sandwiches. And his kitchen, 15 dishes all laid out, and then back to his sound. Absolutely amazing to me. I don't know how he does that.
You have to make sure you're at Moat Studios, though, because I think there are other studios where they also record, and he doesn't work there, so you're not going to get the lunch. So it has to.
But I think it's nice that you've had the opportunity to go back, explore the characters. They've almost, they've written you almost its own very own series, and it's kind of nice to get to explore something like that. And I think an awful lot of fun as well, by the sounds of how you both describe it.
Yes, great fun.
It's a joy. It really is. It's an absolute joy. We get on very, very well. We laugh a lot. Sam is very naughty, and he makes everybody laugh. Ken is very serious. Our director. He's quite. Otherwise, we'd never get anything done. He has to be quite, quite tough with us. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's been a real kind of unexpected joy.
Yes, and one little additional thing was that because different actors come in, for all the different episodes that I haven't seen for years, especially as I'm here in America, and you're back there and suddenly through the door comes somebody constantly catching up with people. That was such a pleasure. And
particularly somebody like Carolyn Seymour, who has been, a regular villainess with us. And she's been great. So she's kind of part of the team. And we've had others as well that have sort of become, for a short while, part of the team, and then they're killed off or something.
And you got to go into the studio with Phantom as well, and you did the Remembrance commentary track for the Who Talks range, and you went back in, and Toby Haydock looked after you well that day. And again, I suppose going back and talking about a piece of television that you did some time back, that must be quite, I suppose it's either quite difficult or quite interesting, and I'm not sure which it would be, especially as I'm interviewing you about it today.
Was that the stuff we did in Dalston? I think it was, wasn't it? We had to get a car. Oh, I had my car. Do you remember, Pam? And we all drove over there after work, and we went in and did the commentary, and that was quite strange. And wasn't Andrew there? It wasn't Andrew. It was it was the editor, the script.
Andrew Cartmel was there.
It wasn't Andrew, but that's who it was. Yes, and yes, it was most strange.
When Tom was there, Tom Baker was there. When we were
you probably would have done the robots one as well, I would have thought. But I'm particularly on about the Remembrance one. Simon was there as well. Simon Williams was there. And of course, Toby Haydock looks after the sort of moderation and keeps you all in shape and on track. But they're good fun, aren't they?
Yes, I remember that, and it was good fun. But he's basically doing a running commentary, basically talking over the entire thing. Actually, probably I can't imagine it was much fun to watch, but anyway, we were there doing that. So yeah, that was good.
But Toby is the fount of all knowledge when it comes to Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
Some people are.
And of course, Pamela, you it's not your first Doctor Who. We've got to reference it. You've already referenced it yourself, but obviously you came in and did Robots of Death, which again is another fan classic. You seem to be in all the fan classics. Wonder if there's a link in here somewhere. But Robots of Death, you came in, you played 2. So I mean, again, that was an early role for you, but working with Tom Baker in that one.
Yes, that's right, and that was one of the very early television job for me too, and that was a wonderful way of coming into it because Tom just made it. I did know Tom from before, but it just made it laugh. It was tremendous. It was really fun to do that.
How different were the 2 serials for you?
I beg your pardon?
How different were the 2 serials for you? So obviously they were filmed some time apart, different actors, different doctors. Was it different? Did it feel different?
Yes, completely different. Completely different. It's interesting because, of course, it's 2 totally different Doctor Who's with different attitudes and totally different time. Yes, chalk and cheese, but it's so interesting that it can fit in seamlessly with all the other episodes. There you go. That's the playtime. That's the pretend that Karen was talking about. It works. It works if you.
Don't you think that the Doctor Who, whoever it is that run Doctor Who, BBC Doctor Who, whatever, people are missing a trick really by not getting us back in there again? Don't you think that it doesn't, not as the characters but as the actors? I think it'd be great. The fans would love it. They love seeing the old faces and things in there.
Absolutely, I'd start bring you back.
That'd be a very good idea.
I think it'd be great. They'd have to drag me out of Cornwall, but nevertheless.
Oh, to be honest, I wouldn't come out of Cornwall right now. I'd stay there. It's absolutely
Tier 1.
How can you be tier 1? I mean, tier 1. Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm in tier 3. So
Is that tier 1? Are you tier 1?
We're the only place in the country, apart from the Isle of Wight, that is tier 1.
Tier 1 good, tier 3 not good. So I'm tier 3, you're tier 1, and I'm very jealous that you can still go and have a pint around your pub.
Well, I will be able to on Wednesday. My swimming pool opens on Wednesday. We can go to the pub. We can have 6 people from different households inside our house. There's all sorts of things we can do that were taken for granted until about nine months ago. And yeah, no, we're very lucky, but I'm slightly worried that the entire country is going to sort of emigrate to Cornwall, and then we'll be tier 3.
Fingers crossed that doesn't happen. What next for the both of you? What's coming up next? What's life got in store for you in the near future? I appreciate COVID, but take COVID away. Is there anything exciting coming up you want to share with us?
I really mainly do audio stuff now. I don't see anything else. The exciting things are when Countermeasures is back in again. We run a radio group here, which we try and do some radio stuff, live radio, but it's really voice. Now, I don't move about like I used to move Can't do the cartwheels I used to make. So do what I can. But so it's really just exciting, just keeping going. Never know what the next day is going to bring. But
Yeah, I
more or
agree.
less, yeah. I think I've got a Hand of Fear book coming out on Audible, which is a Doctor Who spin-off. That comes out in January, doesn't it? BBC book.
Yes, it does, yes.
And I was going to do another one, but that was cancelled because of not going to England and COVID and everything. So I hope maybe next year. He said he was going to do it again. I hope we can do it.
Lots of projects have been postponed, but for sure I would imagine it'll come back. And how about yourself, Karen?
Well, in terms of acting work, I really don't know. Perhaps things will come up. I'm not actively really seeking acting work at the moment, but I do a lot of music, and I play everybody knows this now, I'm sure, but anyway, I play the piano. I play the piano and I teach piano, but I also play the piano accordion, and I play in two orchestras. One's the #1 Ladies Accordion Orchestra, which is an amateur orchestra, but I also play with the London Accordion Orchestra, which is a big orchestra, and we go and do things we compete in all over Europe, not this year, obviously. So it's very, very challenging for me, but I really, really enjoy it. And just recently down here, I started writing music for accordion. It's taken me a while to work out how to do that, because it's a different instrument to the ones that I grew up with. But I'm getting there, and I'm going to try and write a book of accordion tunes called Finding My Voice. Musicians will know what I mean by that. And it's a sort of, finding your voice, finding your expression through music that is not somebody else's. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I've written 4 tunes so far, so that's what I'm going to do.
Well, that sounds quite intriguing. And I want to know what that means now. You've got me intrigued with that.
Yeah, it's just, well, go and read about it. It's about sort of, I think it applies particularly in music, but it sort of applies for acting as well. But it is that thing of just finding your musicality, if you like. I suppose that's one way of putting it.
Are you composing these, Karen?
Yes.
These are your tunes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
you had a musical at one point. Was it? Do you remember?
I did. I wrote a musical quite a few years ago for children. It was a musical version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which I adapted for primary school kids. And I knew that I could compose, because I did compose, and I composed all the music for that. And it was done in a lot of schools, and I've got it in a drawer somewhere now. So I know I can write music, but it's hard. It's hard writing music, but I'm going to get there. And now I've got the studio, I've got no excuse. So.
You absolutely don't. And it looks absolutely beautiful. Is that a recent addition to the house?
Yeah, it's an old barn that we've just converted. So, it's got very nice, all the windows are south facing. So it's really very nice. We've only just moved in this weekend to this bit of our house. So we don't live in here, but we're very lucky. And we've got a holiday barn here, which came with the property. I mean, this is Cornwall, this isn't London. It's manageable down here. And so when July the 4th came, the holiday barn was absolutely flooded with friends and relatives throughout the entire summer until we went into lockdown again. For free. I mean, they were just staying there because they hadn't been on holiday and couldn't go anywhere. So that was nice.
The good times will return. I know that this time, hopefully next year, we can get hugs, we can get visits, we can see friends, we can see family, lots of things we miss. And I think there is some positive times.
We were supposed to have a big party this summer and it couldn't happen. So we're going to have to do it next year instead.
Well, I had a reasonably significant birthday.
It was a very significant birthday.
Well, I had one at the beginning of the year, but I'm refusing to turn into that significant age until I can celebrate it properly. So I'm hanging on by my fingernails to the previous age in my head. So that's how I'm getting away with it.
Good idea.
I think so as well.
I find it a bit nerve-wracking thinking of big groups again. I don't know. I sort of got so used to staying away from big groups. I wonder how it will be. How when one will feel comfortable in big groups that are not organized.
Jab, 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 and then we'll be fine.
Indeed. And with that, I'm going to bring our time to a close. You have both been fabulous company for the last hour or so. It's been amazing chatting to you. Thanks for giving up your time to talk to us. It's been great reminiscing. It's been great listening to all the things you've got to say. Karen, Pamela, really appreciate you taking time out with us today.
Thank you.